You know, when you get to my age, 68 years on this earth, you think you've seen it all. You think nothing can surprise you anymore. But then life has this cruel way of showing you just how wrong you can be. My name is Harold Mitchell. For 43 years, I was married to the most remarkable woman I've ever known, Eleanor, my Ellie. We weren't perfect, but we built a life together that I was proud of. We raised our daughter Sarah, saved for retirement, and dreamed of growing old together in our modest home on Maple Street. But 2 years ago, cancer took my Ellie away, pancreatic. By the time they found it, there wasn't much the doctors could do except make her comfortable. Those final months were, well, they were hell, to put it plainly. But I was there every day, holding her hand, adjusting her pillows, reading to her from those mystery novels she loved so much. Even when she couldn't respond anymore, I was there, because that's what you do when you love someone. That's what 43 years of marriage means. When she passed, I was devastated but not unprepared. We'd had time to say our goodbyes, to put affairs in order. What I wasn't prepared for, what I never could have imagined, was what happened next. The funeral was set for a Tuesday. Nothing fancy, just as Ellie wanted. A simple service at the church where we'd been members for decades, followed by a gathering at our home. I'd spent days calling friends and family, arranging for flowers, selecting photos for a memorial board. Her sister Catherine flew in from Arizona. Old friends from college made the drive from 3 states away. But my daughter Sarah and her husband Marcus, they didn't show up. I kept watching the door of the church, thinking they must be running late. Traffic, maybe. Or perhaps one of the kids was sick. My grandchildren, Emma, 10, and Luke, 7, they adored their grandmother. Surely they'd want to say goodbye. The service began. I sat in the front pew, alone except for Catherine beside me, clutching my hand. Pastor Jim spoke beautifully about Ellie's life, her kindness, her volunteer work at the hospital. Friends shared memories that made me laugh through my tears. But that empty space where my only child should have been, it felt like another death. When I finally got home that evening, exhausted from grief and putting on a brave face for our guests, there was a text message from Sarah. "Sorry we couldn't make it. Marcus had an important meeting. We'll call soon." A text message for her mother's funeral. I called her immediately. It rang 5 times before she answered, her voice hushed. "Dad, now's not a good time." "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "your mother's funeral was today. Where were you?" There was a pause and I could hear Marcus's voice in the background. "I know, Dad. I'm sorry, Marcus couldn't reschedule his meeting and put him on the phone," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Another pause, and then Marcus's smooth, confident tone, the same tone he used when selling luxury condos to wealthy clients. "Harold, I understand you're upset, but you need to be reasonable. Some of us have businesses to run. I couldn't possibly waste an entire day on something so, well, insignificant in the grand scheme of things." Insignificant. My Ellie, 43 years of marriage, mother to our child, grandmother to their children. Insignificant. I don't remember what I said next. I know I was yelling. I know tears were streaming down my face. I remember Catherine coming into the room, taking the phone from my shaking hands, and speaking in low, furious tones before hanging up. That night, I slept on Ellie's side of the bed for the first time, clutching her nightgown to my chest, wondering how the world could keep spinning when she was gone, and how my own daughter could betray her memory so completely. I wish I could say things improved after that Sarah came to her senses, that she recognized the cruelty of what they'd done. But that day marked the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship, one where I slowly began to see just how much Marcus had changed my daughter, and just how little I apparently meant to them now. 2 weeks after the funeral, Sarah finally brought the kids to visit. Emma threw her arms around me, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye to Grandma," she whispered. Luke just held my hand silently, looking confused and sad. Sarah watched us uncomfortably from the doorway. "Dad, the kids have homework. We can only stay for an hour." An hour, after missing their grandmother's funeral. That became the pattern. Brief, rushed visits, cancelled plans, always some excuse, usually revolving around Marcus's busy schedule or important social engagements. When I did see them, Marcus treated me with thinly veiled contempt, speaking to me slowly as if I were becoming senile, dismissing my opinions, making comments about how expensive retirement homes are these days, while eyeing my house. Meanwhile, I watched my grandchildren growing distant, being taught that family obligations were inconvenient, that elderly relatives were burdens rather than treasures. It broke my heart all over again, knowing what Ellie would have thought of all this. But I swallowed my pride. I kept quiet. I endured the humiliations because I couldn't bear the thought of losing my grandchildren too. So I smiled through Marcus's condescension, pretended not to notice when Sarah checked her watch every 5 minutes during our visits, and tried to pack as much love as I could into the brief moments I had with Emma and Luke. For 2 years I lived like this, a ghost in my own family, the inconvenient old man who refused to conveniently disappear, all the while carrying the weight of Ellie's absence, navigating grief without my partner of 4 decades. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have imagined, was that Ellie had left me more than just memories. She had left me a way out, a way to reclaim my dignity, and perhaps even save our daughter from the man who had changed her so completely. But that revelation would come later. First, I had to reach my breaking point, and Marcus, in his arrogance, was determined to push me there. The breaking point came during last year's Thanksgiving. Sarah had reluctantly invited me after Emma called me in tears, begging to know why I wasn't coming. I later learned Marcus had told the children I'd declined the invitation, a complete fabrication. When Sarah called to extend the actual invitation, her voice carried that familiar tension. "Dad, we're having Thanksgiving at our house. Emma really wants you there, so if you're not busy, you could join us." Not busy. As if a widower living alone would have conflicting holiday plans. As if I hadn't spent every Thanksgiving with my family for decades. "I'd love to come," I said, ignoring the conditional nature of the invitation. "Can I bring anything?" "No," she said quickly. "Marcus has ordered everything from that gourmet place downtown. It's all taken care of." I arrived at their sprawling suburban home, clutching a bottle of wine and a photo album I'd put together of Ellie's Thanksgivings past. Pictures of Sarah as a child, helping her mother in the kitchen, making hand-traced turkey drawings. I thought perhaps these memories might spark something in my daughter, remind her of the woman who had loved her unconditionally. Marcus answered the door in a crisp button-down shirt, crystal tumbler of scotch already in hand at 2 in the afternoon. "Harold," he said, not bothering to hide his displeasure. "You're early." I checked my watch. "Only 10 minutes. I thought I might help Sarah with—" As I said, "Everything's catered." He reluctantly stepped aside. "The other guests won't be here for another hour." Other guests? Sarah hadn't mentioned anyone else. The house was immaculate as always, a showcase rather than a home, designer furniture that looked uncomfortable to sit on. Artwork that Marcus boasted was appreciating nicely, rather than chosen for any aesthetic pleasure. The smell of catered turkey and sides wafted from the kitchen, where Sarah was transferring food from plastic containers to serving dishes, trying to create the illusion of homemade. Emma and Luke spotted me and came running. Those moments with my grandchildren were the bright spots in my increasingly lonely existence. Emma, now 12, was beginning to look so much like Ellie around the eyes that sometimes it took my breath away. Luke had developed a passion for model airplanes, something I'd introduced him to during one of our precious visits. "Grandpa, did you bring pictures?" Emma asked excitedly. I nodded, patting the album. "Lots of pictures of your grandma. She used to make the best pumpkin pie you've ever tasted." "Better than the ones Dad orders?" Luke asked innocently. Marcus appeared behind them. "Children, go wash up. Our guests will be arriving soon." As they reluctantly left, I tried again with Sarah, who was now arranging napkins with mechanical precision. "I brought some of your mother's old photos," I said. "Thought the kids might like to see them." Sarah glanced at the album, and then at the doorway where Marcus had been standing. "Maybe later, Dad. We're on a tight schedule." The other guests turned out to be Marcus's business associates and their wives, people I'd never met, who looked at me with thinly veiled curiosity as if I were some exotic exhibit at a zoo. I was seated at the far end of the table, away from my grandchildren, between a woman who spent the entire meal on her phone and an empty chair. Throughout dinner, Marcus held court, talking about his latest real estate developments, the vacation home they were building in Aspen, the private school where Emma and Luke were excelling despite the astronomical tuition. Occasionally, he would throw a question my way. "Isn't that right, Harold?" Though I'd have no context for what was being discussed, Sarah remained mostly silent, nodding and smiling at appropriate intervals. This wasn't my daughter. My Sarah had been opinionated, passionate, full of laughter. This woman was a shadow, a carefully dressed mannequin in an expensive house. Then came the moment that finally broke me. One of the business associates asked about the family photo on the mantel, a professional portrait of Marcus, Sarah, and the children. "Lovely family," the man commented. "Do you have other children, Sarah?" Before Sarah could answer, Marcus chuckled. "No, just the 2. Though sometimes I feel like I have 3 children with Harold here, requiring so much attention. Awkward laughter rippled around the table. Sarah stared at her plate. Speaking of family, Marcus continued, swirling his scotch, Harold here is still rattling around in that outdated house. We keep telling him to sell, the property values in that neighborhood are surprisingly good, but he's sentimental about it. It's where I lived with my wife, I said quietly. Ah, yes, Sharon, Marcus said dismissively. Eleanor, I corrected, feeling my hands begin to shake. Right. Eleanor, he turned to his guests. Passed away a while back. Frankly, it was probably a blessing. The medical bills were becoming quite the burden. The table fell silent. Even Sarah looked up, shocked. A blessing? I heard myself say, my voice barely audible. Marcus, oblivious or simply not caring, continued. Well, yes, I mean quality of life and all that. And it freed you up, Harold. No more playing nurse. Though you do seem to be having trouble moving on, perhaps a senior community would... I stood up so abruptly that my water glass toppled, spilling across the immaculate tablecloth. 43 years of marriage reduced to a financial burden. My Ellie's suffering, her courage, her fight, dismissed as something to be freed from. My wife's name, I said, my voice shaking but clear, was Eleanor Mitchell. She was the love of my life for over 4 decades. She volunteered at hospitals even when she was sick herself. She put Sarah through college by working 2 jobs when my company downsized. She remembered the birthdays of every child in our neighborhood and baked them cookies. She forgave you, Marcus, when you missed our anniversary dinner because you were networking with that blonde from your office. The blonde Sarah doesn't know about. The table went deadly silent. Sarah's face drained of color. Dad, she whispered, what are you talking about? But now that I'd started, 2 years of swallowed words came pouring out. Did you know, Sarah, that your husband regularly mocks your weight to his friends when you're not around? That he refers to you as his first wife when he's had too many drinks? Did you know he told me last Christmas that he only married you because your career as a teacher meant you'd be low maintenance while he built his business? Marcus's face had turned an ugly shade of red. That's enough, Harold. You're clearly confused. I'm not confused, I said, feeling clearer than I had in years. I've been silent too long. I've watched you isolate my daughter, belittle her career, turn my grandchildren into status symbols rather than children. I've endured your contempt because I was afraid of losing what little connection I still had to my family. I turned to the stunned dinner guests. Did you know Marcus here tells everyone that Doug's development project is failing because Doug has a gambling problem? That he thinks Richard's wife is having an affair with their tennis instructor? That he considers all of you useful idiots who don't see through his inflated success stories? One by one, Marcus's business associates looked at him with dawning realization and anger. Years of overheard phone calls, of Marcus's unguarded moments when he thought I wasn't listening or wouldn't remember, all came flooding back with perfect clarity. You're done here, old man, Marcus hissed, standing up. Sarah, call a car for your father. He's clearly having some kind of episode. I looked at my daughter, hoping to see some recognition, some spark of the woman Ellie and I had raised. Her eyes were wide, confused, darting between her husband and me. Sarah, I said gently, your mother kept records of everything. She was always the organized one. Before she died, she gave me a key to a safety deposit box. I haven't had the heart to open it yet, but I think it's time. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing my arm. He's delusional. Security risks, Sarah. Remember what we discussed? Your father might need full-time care. I pulled my arm free with surprising strength. I'm leaving now, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot. I walked out of that beautiful, soulless house with my head high, leaving behind a table of shocked faces and my stunned daughter. As I started my old car, I saw Emma watching me from the window, confusion and worry on her young face. I raised my hand in a small wave, hoping she could see the love in the gesture. Driving home to the empty house on Maple Street, I felt a strange mixture of despair and determination. I had burned a bridge today, but perhaps it was a bridge that needed burning. And Ellie? Well, Ellie had always been the planner in our relationship. If she had left something in that safety deposit box, it wasn't by accident. The next morning, with my hands still shaking from the confrontation, I found myself at First National Bank, presenting my ID and the small key I'd kept on my nightstand for 2 years. What I found inside would change everything. The safety deposit box contained a thick manila envelope, with my name written on it in Ellie's neat handwriting. The bank manager led me to a private room where I could examine the contents. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside, I found a letter on top, dated 3 weeks before Ellie passed away. I recognized the stationery, pale blue with a border of forget-me-nots that Sarah had given her one Mother's Day long ago. My dearest Harold, if you're reading this, then I've been gone for some time. I'm sorry for the secrets I've kept from you. Not secrets of the heart, you've always had all of me there, but secrets of my work. Remember when I took that part-time administrative job at the courthouse 15 years ago? It wasn't just for extra income, as I told you. I was recruited by the FBI as part of their financial crimes task force. My position gave me access to records that helped track money laundering operations through real estate transactions. My book club on Thursday nights? That was my meeting with my handler. I never told you because I wanted to protect you. The less you knew, the safer you were. And I was good at it, Harold. I helped build cases that put away some very dangerous people. It gave me purpose after Sarah left home. The reason I'm telling you now is because of Marcus. 3 years ago, his name started appearing in our investigations. Nothing concrete enough for charges, but enough red flags to put him on our radar. The offshore accounts, the mysterious investors, the properties that change hands multiple times in short periods. Classic signs of money laundering. I tried to warn Sarah subtly, but by then Marcus had already isolated her from us. When my cancer diagnosis came, I requested to be taken off the case for obvious reasons, but I kept copies of everything I'd gathered. It's all here in this box. Financial records, recorded conversations. Yes, our Christmas dinners were more productive than you knew. Bank transfers that don't add up. I'm not asking you to finish my work, Harold. I'm asking you to protect our daughter and grandchildren. Use this information however you need to. My handler's contact information is included. Special Agent Diana Reynolds. She knows to expect your call someday. I'm sorry to burden you with this, my love, but you're stronger than you know. You always have been. Forever yours, Ellie. I sat there reading and rereading the letter, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with this secret agent who had been hiding in plain sight. My Ellie, administrative assistant by day, FBI informant by night. It seemed impossible. And yet it explained so much. Her insistence on attending every family gathering, even when Marcus clearly didn't want her there. Her detailed note-taking that I'd attributed to her natural organization. The private phone calls she'd take in our bedroom. I examined the rest of the box's contents. Financial statements. Photographs of Marcus meeting with men I didn't recognize in parking garages and back rooms of restaurants. Transcripts of conversations recorded at our home during holidays and family gatherings. Conversations where Marcus had spoken too freely, believing he was among impressed in-laws who wouldn't understand the complexities of his business dealings. There was also a sealed envelope addressed to Sarah, and another containing a flash drive labeled Evidence Copy 2. I gathered everything with numb fingers and returned home, where I spread the documents across our dining room table, the same table where Ellie and I had shared thousands of meals, helped Sarah with homework, and in her final months apparently compiled evidence against our son-in-law. The question was, what would I do with it all? The answer came sooner than expected. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Sarah stood there looking exhausted and confused. "May I come in?" she asked formally, as if she were a stranger rather than the child who had once run freely through these rooms. I stepped aside, noting the absence of Marcus's luxury SUV in my driveway. Of course. She entered hesitantly, her eyes moving around the living room, unchanged since Ellie's passing, before settling on the dining room table covered with papers. "What's all that?" she asked. "The contents of your mother's safety deposit box," I answered honestly. "Sarah, we need to talk about Marcus." She wrapped her arms around herself defensively. "He says you're having memory problems, that you're making things up because you're lonely and bitter. And what do you think?" I asked gently. Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to think anymore. The things you said at dinner about that blonde woman." I sighed heavily. "Your mother knew. She confronted him about it 3 years ago. That's why he stopped coming to our anniversary dinners." "Mom knew," Sarah whispered, looking stricken. "She never told me. She was trying to protect you. We both were." I gestured to the chair across from me. "But I think it's time for the truth, Sarah. All of it." Slowly, I explained what I'd discovered: Ellie's secret work, the investigation into Marcus's business dealings, the evidence she'd compiled. As I spoke, Sarah's expression shifted from disbelief to horror, to a strange, calm resolution. "He's been moving money for some very dangerous people," I concluded. "Your mother believed he might not even know who he's really working for, but ignorance won't protect him, or you and the children, if this all comes crashing down." Sarah sat silently for a long moment, then reached for her phone. I watched as she pulled up her text messages and handed me the device. There in black and white was a text from Marcus sent just hours ago. Don't believe your father's delusions. I've consulted with Dr. Michaels about elder care options. Time to discuss power of attorney. Your father is clearly unstable and sitting on a valuable property we could use for the Westridge development. He wants to declare me incompetent, I said, oddly unsurprised. Take control of my house. Sarah nodded, her face pale but determined. He sent that before I could even talk to you, before I could find out if what you said was true. He just assumed he could manipulate me into going along with it. And now? I asked carefully. Now I want to see everything Mom collected, she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. And then I want to call this Special Agent Reynolds. We spent the night going through Ellie's evidence. Sarah recognized names, connected dots that even Ellie hadn't been able to, identified properties and transactions that had seemed odd to her, but that Marcus had dismissed when questioned. I'm an idiot, she whispered around midnight, pushing away a stack of bank statements. I was a math teacher, for God's sake. I should have seen the numbers didn't add up. I reached across the table and took her hand. Your mother was trained by the FBI, and even she took years to put it all together. Don't blame yourself. But I let him change me, she said, looking around at the home where she'd grown up. I let him isolate me from you and Mom. I let him turn me into this accessory to his life, this silent, nodding doll who doesn't question anything. You can change that, I said firmly. Starting now. The next morning, Sarah made 2 phone calls. The first was to Special Agent Reynolds, Ellie's former handler, who agreed to meet us that afternoon. The second was to Marcus, telling him she was taking the children to visit me and would be home later. Let him think I'm following his plan, she explained grimly. Let him think I'm here to talk you into a care facility. When Agent Reynolds arrived, I was struck by how ordinary she looked. A middle-aged woman with practical shoes and a no-nonsense haircut. She might have been a school administrator or a bank manager. I supposed that was the point. Eleanor Mitchell was one of our best, she said after introducing herself. Not a trained agent, but she had an instinct for this work, and she was motivated by the best reason, protecting her family. Over the next few hours, we laid out everything Ellie had collected, supplemented by Sarah's insider knowledge of Marcus's business dealings. Reynolds took copious notes, occasionally making phone calls to colleagues, speaking in the clipped, coded language of law enforcement. We've been building this case for years, she finally said, but we've been missing the connections your wife and daughter have provided. With this, we can move forward with an arrest warrant. When? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the enormity of what we were setting in motion. Soon, within the week. We'll need to coordinate with local police. Reynolds looked at Sarah with compassion. Mrs. Townsend, you should prepare yourself and your children. This will not be easy. Sarah squared her shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of Ellie that my heart ached. Nothing worth doing ever is. After Agent Reynolds left with copies of our evidence, Sarah and I sat in silence for a long moment. What now? I finally asked. Now I take my children and go stay at a hotel, she said decisively. I don't want them in the house when they come for Marcus. You could stay here, I offered, hope rising in my chest. She looked around the living room at the faded wallpaper Ellie had chosen 20 years ago, the worn but comfortable furniture, the family photos covering every surface. Yes, she said softly. I think we should. I helped her pick up Emma and Luke from their friends' houses, making up a story about a surprise sleepover at Grandpa's. As the children excitedly packed overnight bags, Sarah discreetly gathered important documents, family photos, and irreplaceable keepsakes from her home. That night, as my grandchildren slept in their mother's old bedroom and Sarah dozed fitfully on the couch, I sat in my recliner, watching over them all, feeling an odd sense of peace, despite the storm I knew was coming. Ellie had protected our family from beyond the grave. Now it was my turn to be strong, for Sarah, for the grandchildren, and for the memory of the remarkable woman who had shared my life. 3 days later, the arrest came. Marcus was taken into custody at his office, the charges including money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. The news coverage was immediate and sensational. Successful real estate developer revealed to be involved in criminal enterprise. Sarah watched the coverage with dry eyes, her arm around Emma, who cried with confusion and fear. Is Dad going to jail? Luke asked bluntly. Sarah knelt to his level. Yes, honey. He did some very bad things, and now he has to face the consequences. Are we poor now? Emma asked, always practical. No, I interjected. You have me. And it turns out your grandmother left quite a nest egg that Marcus knew nothing about. This was true. Another revelation from the safety deposit box had been documentation of Ellie's FBI compensation, carefully invested over 15 years and now worth a considerable sum, enough to ensure Sarah and the children would be secure while they rebuilt their lives. In the days that followed, we formed a new routine. Sarah began the divorce proceedings. The children slowly adjusted to life in the more modest surroundings of my home. I taught Luke how to build model airplanes in the garage workshop, while Emma discovered Ellie's old piano in the basement and began teaching herself to play. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, something we'd done countless times when Sarah was growing up, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "I missed Mom's funeral," she said, her voice breaking. "I can never make that right." I took her hand. "No, you can't. But you can honor her memory by living the life she wanted for you, one of integrity, courage, and love." She leaned her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. "I'm so sorry, Dad." "I know, sweetheart," I said, feeling the weight of the past 2 years finally beginning to lift. "I know." 6 months passed. The seasons changed, bringing summer heat to our little house on Maple Street, now filled with life again in a way it hadn't been since Ellie's passing. The criminal case against Marcus moved forward methodically, with Sarah cooperating fully with prosecutors. In exchange, she received immunity from any charges. The authorities recognized she had been kept in the dark about the true nature of her husband's business. Marcus, facing overwhelming evidence, eventually accepted a plea deal. The man who couldn't waste a day on his mother-in-law's funeral would now waste 15 years in federal prison. A fitting irony, though I took no joy in it. The children deserved better from their father, regardless of his crimes. Sarah transformed before my eyes, shedding the artificial polish Marcus had imposed on her, like a snake molting its skin. She resumed teaching mathematics at the local high school, her passion for education reignited. Her laughter, Ellie's laughter, really filled our home again. The children thrived in this more authentic environment, though they struggled with the complicated emotions surrounding their father's imprisonment. "Why did Dad do those bad things?" Luke asked one evening as I helped him with his science project. "Was it because he didn't have enough money? How do you explain greed to an 8-year-old? The insatiable hunger that some people have for more, always more, regardless of what they already possess." "Your dad forgot something important," I said carefully. "He forgot that the most valuable things can't be bought or sold. Things like family, honesty, and integrity." Luke nodded solemnly, though I knew he couldn't fully grasp the concept yet. In time, perhaps. In time. Emma, at 13, understood more. She'd overheard enough arguments between her parents, seen enough of Marcus's true nature peeking through his carefully maintained facade to recognize the truth when it was finally exposed. "Mom says Grandma was like a secret agent," she said one afternoon as we tended Ellie's flower garden together. "That she was catching bad guys right under everyone's nose." I smiled, handing her a trowel. "Your grandmother was extraordinary in many ways, most of which none of us knew until she was gone." "I wish I'd known her better," Emma said wistfully. "You're more like her than you know," I told her. "She would have been so proud of how you're helping your mom and looking after your brother." Emma beamed, the compliment clearly touching her. "Do you think? Could you tell me stories about her? The real her, not just the grandmother stuff?" And so began our evening ritual, stories of Ellie, the full and complex woman I had loved, not just the sanitized grandmother version the children had known. Sarah often joined these sessions, sometimes hearing stories about her mother she'd never known herself. It became a form of healing for all of us, these shared memories keeping Ellie's spirit alive in our home. On the 1-year anniversary of Marcus's arrest, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table after the children had gone to bed, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about the future. "The divorce will be final next month," she said. "Then I'll legally be Sarah Mitchell again, not Sarah Townsend." "Your mother would like that," I said. "She never thought Townsend had the right ring to it." Sarah laughed softly. "She told me that right after we got engaged. Said it sounded like a furniture store." We fell into comfortable silence for a moment. Then Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "Dad, I've been thinking about Mom's money, the FBI compensation." I nodded. She was referring to the substantial sum that had been revealed in Ellie's safety deposit box, currently sitting in a trust I had established for Sarah and the children. "I want to use it to start a foundation," she continued. "The Eleanor Mitchell Foundation for Grief Support and Financial Education." "Financial education?" I repeated, intrigued. "Yes, If I'd been more financially literate, maybe I would have seen what Marcus was doing sooner. There are so many people, especially women, who don't understand money, who trust their partners completely without asking questions. Her voice grew passionate. And the grief support aspect. For people who lose spouses, parents, children, people who need more than just a few days of casseroles from neighbors before they're expected to move on. I felt tears prick my eyes. It was so perfectly Ellie. Practical help combined with emotional support. She would love that, I said, absolutely love it. There's something else, Sarah continued, a hint of nervousness in her voice. The house Marcus and I owned is being sold as part of the asset forfeiture. Most of the proceeds will go to his victims, as they should, but I've been thinking of buying a small place nearby. Not moving out completely, but having our own space while staying close. My heart sank a little at the prospect of them leaving, though I tried to hide it. Of course they needed their own home. I couldn't expect them to live with an old man forever. Sarah must have read my expression. We'd still have dinner together most nights, she hurried to add. And the kids would stay with you whenever I have late meetings or overnight field trips. It's just, they need their own rooms, their own space to grow. Of course they do, I said, squeezing her hand. And so do you. It's the right decision. I found a place just 3 blocks away, she continued, relief evident in her voice. A little craftsman with a yard for the kids. Nothing fancy, but solid. The kind of home you and Mom would approve of. 3 blocks away. Close enough for daily visits, for Emma to ride her bike over after school, for Luke to run down when he completed a new model airplane. Close enough to remain a family. That sounds perfect, I said, and meant it. 2 months later, we celebrated Sarah's official name change back to Mitchell with a small party in our backyard. Emma had made a cake, lopsided, but made with love. Luke had constructed a banner out of construction paper. A few of Sarah's colleagues from school attended, along with some neighbors who had been supportive throughout the ordeal. As I watched Sarah laughing with her friends, the children playing with the neighbor's dog, I felt Ellie's presence so strongly, it almost took my breath away. Not in a supernatural sense. I've never believed in ghosts, but in the enduring impact of her life on all of ours. In the way Emma tilted her head when concentrating, just like her grandmother. In Sarah's renewed strength and purpose. In the values that continued to guide our family, values Ellie had embodied every day of her life. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and the children were in bed, Sarah found me sitting on the porch swing, Ellie's favorite spot for summer evenings. "Good day?" she asked, settling beside me. "The best," I replied truthfully. "Your mother would be proud of you, Sarah. So proud." She was quiet for a moment, the swing creaking gently beneath us. "Do you think she forgives me? For missing her funeral? For letting Marcus change me so much?" I thought carefully before answering. "Your mother understood human weakness better than anyone I've ever known. She knew how manipulative Marcus could be. That's why she was investigating him. And she loved you unconditionally." "That's not exactly an answer," Sarah noted with a small smile. "The answer is yes," I said firmly. "She forgave you long before you even needed forgiveness, just as I do." Sarah leaned her head against my shoulder, and we swung in peaceful silence as darkness fell, fireflies beginning to twinkle in the yard. The journey wasn't over, of course. The children still had difficult years ahead, processing their father's crimes and absence. Sarah would face challenges rebuilding her career, and eventually perhaps opening her heart to the possibility of love again, a healthier, more equal love than what she had known with Marcus. And I would continue to age, to face the loneliness of widowhood, to navigate the final chapters of my life without my Ellie by my side. But we would face it all together now as a family, the way Ellie would have wanted. 1 week after Sarah's name change party, I visited Ellie's grave for the first time since the funeral. I had avoided it until then, finding more comfort in our home filled with memories than in a cold stone marker. But now, with healing finally beginning, it felt right. I placed a bouquet of forget-me-nots, her favorites, against the headstone and sat on the small bench nearby. "You clever, remarkable woman," I said aloud, not caring if anyone heard me. "You protected them even after you were gone. You knew what needed to be done, and you made sure I had what I needed to do it." A gentle breeze stirred the cemetery trees, sending dappled sunlight dancing across the grave. "Our daughter is herself again," I continued. "The children are flourishing. Your foundation will help people who need it, and I'm doing better than I thought possible." I sat there for nearly an hour, telling Ellie about Emma's piano progress, Luke's latest model airplane, Sarah's plans for the new house. Talking to her felt as natural as breathing, even with the physical barrier of death between us. As I finally stood to leave, I placed my hand on the cool granite of her headstone. Nothing about you was ever insignificant, my love. Nothing. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But alongside it now was gratitude. Gratitude for the 43 years we had shared, for the daughter and grandchildren we had raised, for the quiet courage Ellie had shown throughout her life, much of which I was only now beginning to understand. And most of all, gratitude that even in death, my Ellie had found a way to save our family when we needed her most. Some might call it justice, that Marcus now sat in a prison cell while we rebuilt our lives. But I preferred to think of it as restoration, a return to something authentic and true, after years of living in the shadow of deception. As I drove home to the house on Maple Street, where Sarah would be preparing dinner, where Emma would be practicing piano, where Luke would be waiting to show me his latest creation, I felt for the first time since losing Ellie that I was exactly where I was meant to be. And somewhere, somehow, I believed Ellie knew it too. 5 years have passed since that day at Ellie's grave. 5 years of healing, growth and rebuilding. 5 years that have transformed us all in ways I never could have imagined on that terrible day when Marcus dismissed my wife's funeral as insignificant. Sarah and the children moved into their craftsman house 3 blocks away, just as planned. We established a comfortable rhythm, family dinners at my place 3 times a week, Sunday brunches at theirs, and countless impromptu visits back and forth. The children have their own rooms, decorated to their changing tastes. Emma's has cycled through several phases, currently landing on vintage concert posters, while Luke's remains dedicated to aviation. But they still keep toothbrushes and pajamas at my house for spontaneous sleepovers. The Eleanor Mitchell Foundation has flourished beyond our wildest expectations. What began as a modest endeavor funded by Ellie's FBI compensation has grown into a respected organization with 3 full-time employees and dozens of volunteers. Sarah runs it alongside her teaching job, her natural organizational skills, inherited from her mother, making her exceptionally effective at both. The foundation focuses on 2 main areas: financial literacy programs designed specifically for women, and comprehensive grief support services that extend far beyond the initial period of loss. Both aspects reflect Ellie's practical compassion, her understanding that emotional and financial well-being are often intertwined. Last year, the foundation received a substantial grant from a national women's organization, allowing us to expand our services to neighboring counties. At the awards ceremony, Sarah spoke eloquently about her own experience, how financial ignorance had made her vulnerable to manipulation, how grief had been compounded by betrayal. Her openness touched many hearts and brought new volunteers to our cause. Emma, now 18, will be heading to college in the fall, majoring in criminology, inspired by the grandmother she never fully knew in life but has come to know through our stories. She plays piano beautifully now, often performing at foundation fundraisers. When she plays Ellie's favorite pieces, I sometimes have to leave the room to compose myself, so strongly does she channel her grandmother's spirit. Luke, at 13, has developed into a thoughtful young man with a talent for engineering. His room is filled with increasingly complex models and designs of his own creation. Last year, he won a regional science fair with a drone he built from scratch, a drone designed to deliver emergency medical supplies to hard-to-reach areas. As for Marcus, he continues to serve his sentence, now halfway through his 15-year term. The children visit him occasionally, less frequently as they've grown older and developed their own understanding of his crimes. These visits are Sarah's idea, not mine. They need to know who he is, she explained, the good and the bad. They need to make their own decisions about their relationship with him. I respect her wisdom in this, though I've never accompanied them. Some wounds heal but leave scars that remind us to be careful. Sarah herself has changed perhaps the most dramatically. The timid, controlled woman who once deferred to Marcus in all things has been replaced by a confident, outspoken advocate who testifies before state legislators on financial abuse laws and counsels women leaving manipulative relationships. She's even started dating again, cautiously, sensibly, a history teacher from her school named David, who treats her with the respect and equality she deserves. And me. At 73, I'm older but surprisingly energetic. I volunteer regularly at the foundation, sharing my experience as a widower with others navigating that difficult path. I've taken up woodworking, creating handcrafted furniture for Sarah's house, and special items for the grandchildren. Last year, I built Emma a jewelry box with a hidden compartment, a nod to her grandmother's secret life. And for Luke's birthday, I constructed a custom display case for his most prized models. The house on Maple Street remains my home, though I've finally repainted some rooms and updated the kitchen. Changes Ellie had wanted to make for years, but we'd never gotten around to. I kept her garden, expanding it each year with new varieties of her favorite flowers. Neighbors often stopped to admire it, giving me the opportunity to tell them about the remarkable woman who first planted it decades ago. I still talk to Ellie sometimes, especially in the garden or late at night when the house is quiet. Not out of any belief that she can hear me, but because after 43 years together, the habit of sharing my thoughts with her is too ingrained to break, and somehow I usually know what she would say in response. Today is a special day, the 5th anniversary of the Foundation's establishment. We're holding a celebration in the community center, with past clients speaking about how the organization helped them through their darkest times. Sarah has been bustling about since dawn, checking and rechecking arrangements. Emma is scheduled to perform a piece she composed herself, titled simply Eleanor. Luke has created a short documentary film about the Foundation's work, interviewing staff and clients with remarkable sensitivity for a boy his age. As I dress for the occasion, a new suit, purchased at Sarah's insistence, I find myself reflecting on the journey that brought us here, on how something as terrible as Marcus's betrayal and Ellie's secrets ultimately led to healing and purpose that might otherwise never have been found, on how the worst moment of my life, standing alone at my wife's funeral, abandoned by my daughter and son-in-law, eventually set in motion events that would bring my family back together, stronger than before. There's a knock at my bedroom door, and Sarah peeks in. "Need help with that tie, Dad?" I smile, abandoning my fumbling attempts. "Your mother always tied it for me." Sarah steps in, taking the silk fabric from my hands with practiced movements. "I know. She taught me how when I was 12, said it was an essential skill for a woman to have." She was full of surprising wisdom, I agree, watching my daughter's concentrated expression as she adjusts the knot. The caterer called. "Everything's on schedule," Sarah reports. "Emma's practicing her piece one last time and Luke is doing final edits on his film." "And David?" I ask, referring to her boyfriend of nearly a year now. A slight blush colors Sarah's cheeks. "He's setting up the audio-visual equipment and he asked me to warn you he wants to talk to you about something important later." I raise an eyebrow. "Is that so?" She laughs, patting the finished tie. "Don't look so surprised. You've been dropping hints about grandchildren needing a grandfather figure for months." "Have I?" I ask innocently. "Can't imagine where you got that idea." Sarah's expression turns more serious. "Would Mom approve, do you think, of David? I consider this carefully. Your mother wanted you to be loved properly, to be respected as an equal partner. David does both." I straighten my shoulders. "Yes, she would approve very much." Sarah's eyes glisten slightly. "I wish she could be here today." "In all the ways that matter, she is," I say, offering my arm to my daughter. "She set all of this in motion, the foundation, your freedom from Marcus, the person you've become." "And the person you've become," Sarah adds as we walk down the stairs together. "I don't think I ever properly thanked you, Dad, for standing up for Mom that Thanksgiving, for being strong when I couldn't be." "No thanks necessary," I tell her honestly. "That's what family does. Your mother taught me that. The celebration is everything we hoped for. Emotional testimonials, generous donations, community support." Emma's musical composition brings tears to every eye, its haunting melody somehow capturing Ellie's essence perfectly. Luke's documentary reveals a filmmaker's eye for detail and human emotion that surprises even those of us who know him best. During a quiet moment, as guests mingle over refreshments, Agent Reynolds, now retired but still involved with the Foundation as an advisor, approaches me. "She would be proud," she says simply, nodding toward the banner bearing Ellie's name. "Did you know?" I ask, a question that has lingered for years. "When you recruited her, did you know how extraordinary she would be?" Reynolds smiles, the lines around her eyes crinkling. "We had an inkling. She had what we call the spark, that rare combination of intelligence, intuition, and moral courage. But even we underestimated her." "That was easy to do," I acknowledge. "She never sought recognition." "The best ones never do," Reynolds replies. As the evening winds down, I find myself standing beside the memorial wall, a collection of photographs and quotes celebrating Ellie's life. Not just her secret work, but all aspects of who she was. Mother, grandmother, wife, volunteer, friend, community member. the complete picture of a woman who lived with purpose and died leaving a legacy far greater than she could have imagined. One photograph in particular catches my eye. Ellie in our garden, head thrown back in laughter, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. It was taken on our 40th anniversary, 3 years before her diagnosis. Her joy is so palpable it almost seems to radiate from the image. Grandpa, Emma appears at my side, still holding her sheet music from the performance. Are you okay? I smile at my granddaughter, seeing so much of Ellie in her poised confidence. Just remembering. She looks at the photograph, then back at me. Tell me something about her that I don't already know. Something just between you two. I think for a moment, sifting through decades of shared memories. She couldn't whistle, I say finally. Not a note. It drove her crazy because I could whistle entire songs. She practiced in secret for months, determined to master it. Did she? Emma asks. No, I chuckle. Not even a little, but she never stopped trying. That was your grandmother, persistent to a fault. Emma slips her arm through mine, leaning her head against my shoulder in a gesture so reminiscent of both her mother and grandmother that my heart constricts. I think that's what I admire most about her, Emma says thoughtfully. Not the secret agent stuff, though that's pretty cool, but the fact that she never gave up, on anything or anyone. That's a good lesson to take from her life, I agree. Later that night, back home on Maple Street, I sit on the porch swing, now gently creaking with age, much like myself. The celebration was a success by any measure, but more importantly, it was a fitting tribute to Ellie's legacy. A legacy not of vengeance, but of healing, not of punishment, but of restoration. Marcus's cruel dismissal of my wife's funeral as insignificant has been answered not with equivalent cruelty, but with the creation of something deeply significant. A foundation that bears her name, that embodies her values, that helps those who suffer as we once suffered. There's a certain poetry to that, I think. A certain justice that has nothing to do with prison sentences or public disgrace. The night is clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. I rock gently, enjoying the cool evening air, feeling a profound sense of peace. The journey from that terrible day when my daughter and son-in-law failed to attend Ellie's funeral to this moment has been long and often painful. But sitting here now, I wouldn't change a single step of it, because that journey brought us here, to healing, to truth, to family restored, to a place where Ellie's life is honored not just in memories and photographs, but in the tangible good being done in her name, in the lives being changed, in the family she loved, now thriving. Some might call it revenge, that Marcus lost everything while we found new purpose, but I prefer to think of it as redemption, the ultimate proof that nothing about Ellie's life was insignificant, that her legacy continues to grow and flourish, touching more lives with each passing year, and in the end, that is the most meaningful victory of all. Good night, my love, I whisper to the starlit sky, to the garden where her favorite flowers sleep, to the very air that once carried the sound of her laughter. Thank you for everything. Then I rise, my old joints protesting slightly, and head inside to rest. Tomorrow is another day, another opportunity to honor Ellie's memory through how I live, how I love, how I forgive. Another chance to prove in ways both great and small that nothing about love is ever insignificant.